Hello everyone. So, quite frequently I receive comments or questions from people who ask me, can there be situations in which the Ni function of an INFJ or an INTJ, the Ni dominance of these types, dries up or becomes paralyzed, ineffective, impoverished, scarce, scant? Is it possible that it has always been this way in the life of an INFJ or an INTJ? Is it possible that things used to be different, but because of some event, this phenomenon of drying up happens? And it's a real question, and it's a question of some import for a lot of people, because some of these people may be experiencing just that. So that by asking the question, they're not just asking about a topic in abstract because they're intellectually interested in the possibility of that happening. They're also asking this question because they might be looking for help, looking for feedback, a response that hopefully is able to put words on some of the things they are themselves experiencing. In a sense, they're also looking to see if it's possible to use the vocabulary of INFJ experience to put the finger on what they're going through. And this is something that I want to insist upon at the beginning of this video, and then we'll move on to the more specifically on Ni dominant perspective, using my language, using the language of typology that I use. The thing that I want to emphasize is something like this. There are many phenomena in life that we go through that are, for example, either exhilarating or enervating. They're either life-affirming or weakening. They're either big, like propelling movements forwards, or obstacles. We can feel like we're stuck, or we can feel like we are moving forward. A lot of the time, you can have different conceptual schemes and vocabularies to capture this experience and to try to think of ways to move forward. If you go see a therapist, there's no doubt they will find ways of helping you, but they won't be using the vocabulary of the particular INFJ experience. They'll be using other kinds of vocabularies. If you talk to a religious person, they'll be using other kinds of vocabularies. All of these can be of help and just speak to the multifaceted nature of human experience. It's like a prism of infinitely many perspectives. The INFJ perspective for INFJs, or the INTJ perspective for INTJs, or the slightly broader Ni dominant experience for Ni dominance is one of these vocabularies, and I believe it's effective. Another way of putting this is that there is an INFJ way of experiencing these things, even though these things can also be described through other means and other vocabularies. And I think that once we are able to apply an INFJ perspective or an INTJ angle, we gain in resolution, we understand the problem more intimately, and that can be of massive help. So now that I have said this by way of a preamble, can this phenomenon of Ni drying up happen? Of course it can happen. And it happens to people. So fundamentally, I think that when the phenomenon of Ni drying up happens to INFJs or to INTJs, there's usually one main cause, there's usually one main source, but it has also ramifications that can be a bit more specific from one individual to the next. So the main cause is obviously at some level distrust of the external world, lack of self-esteem, so issues with self-esteem, distrust of the external world, and a tendency toward like a vicious circle, a self-fulfilling prophecy of, if you like, of ossification, of dryness, really, getting more and more schematic and dry. And you see that, of course, the vast majority of the time, perhaps all of the time, you see that in two types of INFJ, not all types of INFJ. You see that in the case of compliant INFJs, the adaptive submissive types, and in solipsistic INFJs, the withdrawn types. You can also see that happen as a reaction to trauma, serious traumatic events. You can see that happen in the case of spiritual INFJs, or secure INFJs as I call them, or spiritualized INFJs. A spiritualized INFJ who experiences significant trauma might revert back to either adaptive submission or solipsism. These phenomena and life itself and our psychic existence as INFJs, it's a dynamic process. It's not static. It's not a case of we get there and we're there forever. We're not spiritualized forever. We're not compliant forever. We're not adaptive we're not solipsistic forever. Often we're a mix of different things anyway. We're never perfect categories. Always keep this in mind. In the end, life itself trumps type, and type blends into life. So never forget that. If type is not a way ultimately of explaining your life, type doesn't have much to use for you. So drying up can certainly happen, like I said, in solipsists, in compliance, and also in the other more spiritual types of INFJs that are post-traumatic. Won't necessarily happen. Not every INFJ is, just like not every person has the same reaction to traumatic events. For some it is really, really traumatic. For others it is less so. It depends on a multitude of factors, but it can happen also in the case of those more secure INFJs. This is true. Now, what is the main cause? Like I said, self-esteem issues, distrust of the external world, and a tendency then to a vicious circle of self-doubt. You have to always keep in mind that distrust of the external world is one of the core challenges for the alienated INFJ, right? Insofar as INFJs feel a sense of alienation from external reality, they don't feel like they are in external reality, but they almost feel more like they are in interaction with external reality. There's a massive difference, right? Between the sense of dwelling in external reality, being like part and parcel of it, not being able to move outside of it, and feeling like you're in interaction with it, or as some of my viewers like to say, feeling like they're experiencing reality as a dream or being actors on the real world stage. From the moment that you have this in your bones, you have that as an existential part of your structure, you're going to face the possibility of not trusting the external world. Because if the external world is you, if you're in it, the question of trusting it doesn't really arise. Only once it's been objectified as something separate from you can the question arise of whether to trust it or not. And so the question of distrust of the external world then becomes very prescient. Now, another important point to emphasize is that there can be different manifestations of distrust, right? And usually those manifestations of distrust of the external world are in fact deviated notions of distrust of oneself. And this is where the lack of self-esteem, or at least the challenges or issues with self-esteem, arise as well. Because insofar as someone decides that they don't trust the external world, what does this say? What does this reveal? It reveals that this person is not trusting that their ego is solid enough, that their own psychic structure is sturdy enough to be able to withstand what the external world may throw at them. And so in a sense, what happens is a retreat, right? What is sometimes called the narcissistic retreat, but really in the psychoanalytic sense of narcissistic, not in the sense of a pathology. Okay, a retreat of the ego into itself. In the case of the adaptive INFJs, the compliant INFJs, the retreat is through this kind of make-believe that they want to get on well with everybody, and they don't want to live in connection with their NI world. This is a way of saying they don't trust their own egos. This is a way of saying they don't trust their own sense of self. They think it's too fragile to face the external world, and so they protect it excessively by playing this make of FE-driven make-believe. And of course this leads to the ossification and drying up of their NI imagery, of their NI tapestry. And this is an issue for them. In the same way, or rather in the same way but manifested very differently, in some sense in polar opposite fashion, is the distrust of the external world as manifested in the solipsistic INFJ. Sometimes people make the mistake of thinking that solipsistic INFJs, just because they're withdrawing and they're focusing on themselves and their own NI world, they have sturdy egos, they have a strong sense of self. No, they do not. If they had a strong sense of self, they would not be afraid of external reality. They would not distrust external reality. Well, of course, there are reasons to distrust external reality, but then to exercise a kind of measured distrust and still to know that it has to be engaged. If you want to live, if you want to flourish, if you want to find meaning, you have to leap into external reality. But that has to be, of course, from the basis of a solid sense of self. If that is not met as a criterion, well, the leap won't be made. And so there'll be narcissistic retreat, narcissistic withdrawal, either manifested as such a preoccupation with the fragility of NI that it should be protected, but at the same time not engaged, because even the person themselves think they can hurt it. In the case of the solipsist, the person doesn't think they will hurt NI by engaging it. They're in fact so immersed in it that they just dwell within it. But in so doing, they protect it and themselves as merged from external reality. The problem is that when that happens, the consolidation of the NI world can happen, because you cannot tell, you cannot say these people are not engaging NI at some level. So consolidation of the NI vision and worldview does happen, but the expansion, the nourishment that NI needs by way of SE gathering of information in external reality, because the NI dynamics are nothing without the input of SE engagement. The NI dynamics are nothing without the input of SE engagement. Never forget this. Well, if you're a solipsist, you're just not going to provide the SE nourishment that's needed for your NI to be dynamic. And so it will become more and more static over time, stagnate and become ossified in a different way, but with the same result as what happens in the case of the more compliant INFJ. Okay, so let me know in the comments what you thought, guys, about this video. I look forward to your comments. Give me a like if you enjoyed it, if you thought it was stimulating. And again, don't forget, I've written 2 books on the INFJ personality, which explores all these topics in great depth. So you can look at The Infinite Soul, my latest book, INFJ Life in the Modern World. Look at the cover, it's very nice. It looks at how INFJs in this world that is often authentically and legitimately considered hostile to INFJs in many ways, can find meaning, purpose, and flourishing by remaining authentically INFJs. You want to know how to do it? Get this book. The first link below is to this book. Check the reviews. If you like them, get the book. And also don't forget about the prequel, The Ecstatic Soul, a new look at the INFJ personality, which lays the basics, the foundations of the contents of the INFJ mind, what it's like to be an INFJ, what's it like to think like an INFJ, the INFJ experience explored with the greatest amount of depth that you can find online. If you're interested, check the link below for The Ecstatic Soul. And as usual, guys, Patreon is the absolute lifeblood of my channel. I depend on your kind donations for the survival of this channel, as a channel where I publish what I hope to be high quality videos every day for you. So if you want to help me to keep going, please consider helping me at the link below. You get access to bonus content. There is a Discord server that looks great that is about to open as well. You get access to the community and to me. So it's a great thing to do. Consider it, please, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.